It's that time when bad is good and terrible is even better. Yes, it's this week's Zaius Report, your weekly look at cult movies and other crap. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, the movie man who knows it all and where the bodies are buried. His horrorness, the Prince of Slime, the original invader for Mars himself, the man for whom the phrase B-grade was invented. Welcome, Zaius.
Well, welcome to another Zaius Report podcast. Yes, this is number 8, and apologies, they haven't really been on air for a few weeks. We're just making a few changes, which of course you will have heard at the start. We've got a new intro. So I do want to thank the guys at Only Funny to Us, OFTU podcast, for doing that. Thanks to the guys. So yes, but the big important thing is we've got a co-host. Yes, his name is Gary. He's my mate, he's my friend, he's my compadre, and he's well known for his horror writing, horror reviewing. You may have recognised him from other serious podcasts. Introducing Gary. How you going, mate?
Hey everyone, it's me, first time here, absolutely terrified, be nice to me.
Oh no, we definitely will. Well, I definitely will anyway, there's no one else here. But it's great to have you here. It really, really is good because you're such a sort of cult movie, fan, the same as I am. And, we both love to stay up late and, watch these horrible, terrible movies that we adore. So it's
There's something wrong with us,
There is. What's that old Alan Alda sort of line? It's sort of like growing up, I could have been a mushroom. It's just, no, but who cares? We love these movies. That's all that's important.
That is very true.
So it's great to have you on board. But before we get started, I mean, you do a lot of horror reviewing yourself.
I do a lot of horror movie reviews for my friend's website, which is Body Count Rising, which is bcrising.com. And on the other form of horror, I do a Big Brother radio podcast.
Well, no, it's not horror. It's a great podcast. It's
I don't know if it's in the last series.
Well, that's the show, not the podcast. I did see there was a bit of outing on some fakeness that apparently got out in the last series.
Oh, there was, yes, a bit of a live feed faux pas, so to speak, where they all went to bed and then Big Brother woke them all up and then they all said, "That's a take." I was like, "What? Hang on."
Oh, God, no.
Interesting moment.
But we'll leave that for your other podcast, which of course is Big Brother Radio, correct?
Yep, you can get to bigbrotherradio.com.
Yeah,
I'd like to do a shout out to my buddy Dr. Detroit who runs that.
Yeah, so definitely if you're a Big Brother fan or just a reality TV fan, definitely check that out. They do some great podcasts and they have some fantastic guests too on their podcast, so definitely check it out. And once again, check out your horror writing, which we will find at
BC Rising. It stands for bodycountrising.com.
What a perfect name.
I can't take credit for the name, unfortunately. It's my friend's one. So.
Still fantastic. So please, everybody, check that out. And of course, thank yous to the normal people who have been great supporters and great helpers to this show. Alana Evans, of course. You can, of course, check her out on Twitter. Ramona, of course, at SportsGal. That's G-A-L, pal. Please, of course, check her out on Twitter. She does 2 fantastic podcasts. And, of course, please check out the guys at Only Funny to Us. You can find them on Twitter at OFTU Podcast, I think it is. But anyway, we'll put up all the links later. But please check them out. So we should, I suppose, talk about some movies rather than just talk about all this sort of nonsense. So we'll be right back. Well, I thought, seeing Gary is joining us, I thought we might actually revisit a movie that we spoke about, well, I spoke about anyway, probably about 4 weeks ago, something like that. And that was Boa versus Python. Oh, it sounds good, doesn't it? You just know it's going to be good with a name like this. Now, it was made in 2004 and directed by David Flores, or David... How do you think it's pronounced, Gary?
I think it could be Flores, but I suppose it's the sort of hyacinth bucket bouquet thing, isn't it? So I'm not quite sure.
Do you think he maybe goes to a few parties and actually sort of says, it's Flores?
It's Davard Flores, darling.
Yes, I'm sure that happens. I wonder if he's got two really awkward sisters. Or maybe two awkward brothers.
Maybe.
It could be, who knows. But anyway, made in 2004. And it's a bit of a crossover movie, I suppose you like. Creature feature, giant monster. Draws upon other movies such as Boa from 2001 or Python from 2000. Or I suppose even going back to Anaconda with the very hot J-Lo. But... this one, of course, is true B grade. It was filmed in Bulgaria, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
And it shows.
It shows. It definitely shows. Now, stars are David Hewlett, who, of course, you will remember from at least one season of Stargate. Jamie Bergman, Annette's Playboy model turned actress, basically turned housewife, I think pretty much after this movie, to be honest. Angel Boris Reed, another Playboy centerfold turned actress, although she tends to do more sort of independent movies. This was a little bit different for her, I suppose. And also Adam Kendrick, who is absolutely fantastic in this movie. I think he steals it a little bit.
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge, I think so. And definitely there's a bit of, what do you want to call it, beefcake for the ladies?
Eye candy for Gary is what I call
Well, yes, that's right. You don't have to be a lady. You just like to, as long as you like men running around with their shirt off with lots of muscles, you'll be a fan of Adam Kendrick. But anyway, I'll give you a quick rundown on the movie and we'll talk about it a little bit. Now, I suppose... what happens if a giant snake, about 100 metres long, gets released out into the American countryside? What is the government going to do? Well, there's clearly only one answer to this. Find another 100-metre snake and send it out after it to try to hunt it down. It surely seems like the most obvious response, and that's exactly what happens in this movie. One of our main stars, obviously Adam Kendrick, is meant to be a big game hunter. He runs a company where he sells big game hunting experience for extreme animals. And he is, of course, partnered with his girlfriend, which is Angel Boris Reed. Now, they get this giant snake, bring it to the United States to do the hunt. But it escapes while it's in transit. And that's when David Hewlett and Jamie Bergman have to come along to try to, stop this giant snake and, of course, stop the evil Adam and Angel. But it's it really follows our normal sort of structure where we've got two animals fighting each other and the humans all sort of caught in the middle. But what did you think about it, Gary?
I've always liked Boa versus Python. It's one of them sort of fun movies I do revisit occasionally. It's sort of from the early days of creature features from the Sci-Fi Channel that nobody paid any attention to until suddenly it's become popular again and people think they've just discovered it. No, it's been around for a while. But the thing is, I mean, like you saying earlier on, comparing it to where we've got like Python and Boa movies, there's also another connection to it as well, which I noticed this time around, but I never noticed before. And there is a definite Predator link as well.
Oh, please explain. I'm fascinated by this.
Well, because if you look at Adam Kendrick's character, most of the time he is either shirtless, smoking a cigar, and shooting the crap out of snakes. If you look at Predator, Arnie is shirtless, smoking a cigar, and shooting the crap out of a predator. It's a definite homage to Predator, or rip-off, depending on how you want to look at it. But there is a definite link there, and it is quite clear throughout the entire film. Once it's in your head, start to see it all the way through that character is pretty much Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator.
I can actually really see that. Yes, I really can see that now. I'll be honest with you. When you first mentioned that to me, I was sort of thinking to myself, Gary, you've been smoking again. What's the wacky weed, But no, but I really do get that. Actually, there is a real sort of connection that I can see. The only difference, though, of course, is that Arnie is the good guy, where, of course, Adam in this is the bad guy.
That is true.
Because David Hewlett, I can't really find very much in similarity between himself and, let's say, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think it's just the way the character was in the action scenes. I think there's something about it. And the fact that this came out the same year as Alien versus Predator, it wouldn't surprise me if it was in the consciousness anyway when they were making it.
I can really see that. I think one difference, definitely, that people should understand if they're going to go out and actually get this movie on Netflix or get it off Amazon, wherever you get your sort of B-grade classics from, is that it is from 2004. So the snake effects are pretty basic.
I've seen worse on Sci-Fi recently. In comparison, to be honest, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Really? Because I know I watched Anaconda again a couple of weeks ago. And
I'm sorry.
I still... There's a lot of things I don't like about Anaconda, but it's got J-Lo in it, so I just keep watching it over and over and over again. I mean, J-Lo walking around the boat in that see-through 90 is honestly... It's worth buying it just for that.
I saw it recently for the first time in ages. The other day, it was on one of the movie channels over here. I completely forgot that Owen Wilson was in it. It was like, oh my God, it's Owen Wilson.
But just about everybody in that movie was either becoming a big name star or had already been a big name star. Mm-hmm. It was, but then again, Anaconda is a bit like Piranha. It's it's a mainstream A movie shot in the style of a B movie.
Yeah.
But where Boa versus Python is definitely B-movie material.
Oh, definitely. But the thing that makes this one stand out, though, is the fact that it was filmed for the Sci-Fi Channel, but yet it does have a lot of nudity and violence in it, which would have been cut out of most TV versions, I would have thought.
Well, it's definitely very different to, I suppose, what Sci-Fi and Asylum is producing today, where, yes, nudity is basically a no-go. But I think you go back 12 years ago and so forth, it was a lot more common. It was like when you made a B movie, especially a monster movie, you at least had to have one of the stars running around naked at some stage.
You do.
But now it seems to not really happen. It's okay to see people get their heads eaten, and get ripped in half.
It's done in a tongue-of-cheek sort of way these days. Like, if you look at the two Piranha remakes, Piranha and Piranha Double D, it's done in a sort of cheesy wink and a nod.
Yes, that is actually very, very true. But there's one thing I suppose about... I should maybe explain a little bit more about this movie, and that is that David Hewlett is meant to be a herpetologist. I think the word's herpetologist, who looks after, animals. So he's raised this giant 100-metre, big snake, and he's using it to try to create anti-venoms for snake bites. So when this other giant snake gets released out into the countryside, our sort of FBI agent, who doesn't really last all that long, actually, from memory, teams up with Jamie Bergman, who's meant to be a marine biologist, and they put these special sort of like camera implants into David Hewlett's snake. I've got to be careful how I say that, but anyway, he puts the implants into this, the good giant snake rather than the bad giant snake. So we actually get to see it almost from a video game style as well. So when the snake's actually trying to hunt down the bad snake, we're watching it almost as if it's a video game. Which is...
it also leads to some of the most comical script writing lines of all time if you're not paying attention. There's a lot of double take moments where she'll go, using my implants, we can track the snake. Like, what? You what? Okay, use your implants to trap this snake. Okay.
Well, because yes, and of course yes. So yes, the joke does work, of course, because it is, of course, Jamie Bergman who was saying it.
Yes. It's just perfect because if you just sort of zone it out for a minute, because it does happen in a part of the film where there's a lot of exposition. So you just you do that sort of exposition daze look at the screen bit, and then randomly she says, "We're going to use my implants to track it." Like what?
Look, it's got some fantastic lines. I mean, I just love, as we said, of course, it was filmed in Bulgaria, but it's meant to be shot in the United States. And it's amazing how all the American soldiers and even the county sheriff has a very Eastern European accent.
They do.
To the extent where there's only about 5 people, I think, in the movie who actually sound American.
It's at the beginning where Jamie's at like this pool party or whatever it is, and it's filled with the most buffest, most gorgeous people I have ever seen on film. I don't know where this party is, but I want to go to it.
Yes, I still want to know. That was meant to be like some sort of retreat for Navy SEALs or something. I mean, it was just. I mean, I didn't know that Navy SEALs had their own country clubs. Yeah, it was very, very weird. And yes, she tries to, of course. Hold her breath with one of the Navy SEALs, but of course only actually wins by taking her top off.
She cheated.
Yes, so she cheated. She definitely cheated. But the other thing too, when we talk about the accents and so forth, is that the American army they actually use the Bulgarian army in this. Obviously did the normal thing where you throw them a few dollars and they gave you a few tanks and trucks and that sort of thing. So, of course, it's all actual ex-Soviet equipment. It's and about the only thing that's really American is sort of like the rifles that they carry. Everything else is Russian. And it's just very, very hard to sort of believe. I almost expected Borat to sort of pop up in the background.
So looking at the muscular guys at that pool party, I was waiting for Putin to turn up.
Riding in
Can't
shirtless.
say that. Too political. Back up.
I mean, he could have. He could have. Although I don't think the Bulgarians are actually great fans of the Russians, to be truthful. But he could have ridden in, shirtless on a pony or whatever.
On a python.
Yeah, right. He could have come on riding the python. Yes, that would have been perfect. I mean, just a great way. But the other thing too is that Adam Kendrick in this, it doesn't seem to be what they do. Neither the FBI nor the giant snake seems to be capable of killing him. He seems to be able to survive any sort of explosion or housing collapse.
It's the Schwarzenegger effect, I'm telling you.
I know, he is literally unkillable. And it's not really until really quite late in the movie that anything sort of starts to go bad for him. One of the things I love about it is that when they finally do, the FBI and the army actually catch him, and then they actually, put him in handcuffs and all the rest of it. And as soon as a bit of news comes and they start discussing what they're going to do because the snake's on the loose again, they turn their back on him. And how does he escape? He literally just runs out the front door of the tent. And then
he's very cartoon villain, isn't he? He's very sort of Rocky and Bullwinkle type villain. He can sort of get out of any sort of situation. Oh,
it's fantastic. And then he just jumps into a tank and drives off. I mean, it's like no one's guarding the tank. And I do love it because the movie starts off where, of course, he's using a bolt-action rifle as a hunter sort of thing. But then after his girlfriend, Angel Boris Reed sort of has, some bad stuff happens to her, let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And he decides that he's going to switch weapons for the hunt. And he gets a flamethrower.
He does, which links it into Aliens.
Oh, yes.
You haven't put enough thought into this, mate.
No, I really haven't. I clearly haven't. I keep viewing it, by its own standards, and I keep forgetting about how often people rip off other people's films, when they're making cheap movies. So it's, and of course he ends up, I think, killing more innocent people with his flamethrower than he ever does do any harm to the snakes.
America.
But look, we won't. God, I almost snorted there. I was laughing so much. But we won't obviously tell you how it ends because obviously the two of us would love you to go out and actually really watch this movie because it is lots of fun. I mean, I think a lot of you will be used to some of the newer products that we've had, with giant sharks and that sort of thing, and for instance, giant shark versus giant octopus, and all these sort of more modern films. Haven't we even got a werewolf shark in one of them?
I think there is. Yes.
I think one of these are all films we'll get to in time, guys. Don't worry. But of course, it's very similar in those sorts of more modern movies that you will have seen on the Sci-Fi Channel, where, as I said before, you've got the two giant animals fighting each other with the humans sort of like thrown in the middle. But that, in a sense, it's very... does this whole concept, you think, Gary, homage itself back to the Japanese from the 50s and 60s?
Yeah, I'm thinking we're looking back on the Godzilla versus movies for most of the inspiration for a lot of these. I mean, it was the inspiration for Alien versus Predator, it was the inspiration for Freddy versus Jason, so it wouldn't surprise me if it's the same thing here.
Well, that's right, because there's really only one Godzilla movie which only stars Godzilla. Mm-hmm. All the others is always Godzilla versus somebody.
Yeah.
And the humans are always the poor innocents, if you like, who are sort of trapped in between. We've often got baddies, though, the same as we have here. We've got, obviously, Angel Boris Reed and Adam Kendrick as our baddies. But the majority of people are goodies, who are sort of just caught up in it all. And they always make up all the collateral damage, as these...
They're only there to be killed off, really.
Yes. Where was it? The great line of in Galaxy Quest, where one of the characters actually sort of says, "Well, I'm only going to be here for a couple of minutes. I don't have a last name."
Yes.
So clearly, I'm not going to last very long. But yet, the collateral damage, and there's a reasonable amount of collateral damage. These two snakes actually do get into sort of a final showdown. Of course, we are in Eastern Europe, even though it's pretending to be the United States. So let's face it, we've got to have a nightclub, and with lots of boom, boom, boom music, which of course attracts the snakes, and they go on a little bit of a feeding frenzy, I suppose you might say.
You could say that
when they get into the nightclub, and that's sort of where we have a bit of our final showdown. So, unfortunately, with this one, we don't really have the disused power station, because I'm always a bit disappointed when we don't have that. But then again, at the start of the movie, where they're hunting it through these, what are supposed to be like these sort of sewer tunnels or something or other, I swear they're actually inside a disused power station.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because I reckon there'd be a few of them around Bulgaria.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I actually just wonder whether they're actually owned by certain people in Hollywood as film sets. It's like, as soon as a power station decides to go offline, somebody in Hollywood stands up and says, right, we're going to buy that.
It wouldn't surprise me at all, to be honest. I mean, it's a good investment, really, if you're going to make a lot of films like this.
Oh, definitely, because you're going to need one. Well, it's like Raptor. It's still, we'll have to revisit Raptor, because guys, you'll remember that we did mention Raptor, I think it was in the second podcast, but we're going to have to relook at that maybe next week or the week after, because the thing I love about that movie so much, I mean, talking about the disused power station, is that it uses every single B-grade movie cliche that I think exists.
It does. Jim Wynorski did a very good job on that one.
Oh, he's absolutely fantastic. I mean, look, he's one of my favourite directors out there. Mm-hmm. There's no, and we're going to be mentioning him soon, actually, in this podcast. So I sent him a Facebook friendship request too the other day. I'm hoping he actually responds, but we shall see. We shall see. So look, that's Boa versus Python. It's really definitely worthwhile checking out. Did you say that it still pops up on the Sci-Fi Channel, Gary?
It does occasionally, yeah. It's sort of it tends to be a sort of late night job. I think the fact that Sony own the distribution rights might hold it up sometimes. It doesn't get shown as much as it should do.
Oh, the word Sony and holding up a movie seem to go hand in hand, don't they?
They really do. But they're not as bad as Warner.
True, very true. But it is definitely available on Amazon, and you won't pay much for it.
I picked up the DVD of it not long ago to replace the VHS I had of it for about 10p. So
yes.
If you go through second-hand sellers, you can get it quite cheap.
and I think when I bought my copy about 2 years ago, even then I think I only paid about $5, US for it. I think the shipping fee was actually more than the disc itself. So you
just to sell it a bit more to people, it does hold up still to this day. It doesn't feel old. It does fit in nicely if you're having a Sci-Fi Channel sort of marathon. It would go nicely in there.
The other thing too, I suppose, just in finishing, what I would say is that it holds its pace really well. Like it's never slow in any way. Like it really does. It moves along all the time. It's bam, bam, bam. Like there's always something happening in this film.
Yeah.
And I do also the people actually who we didn't mention is the hunters who get hired to come on the hunt. Now, could you cliche the United States any more than via these hunters?
It is like the most redneck-looking group of people you'll ever see in your life. I mean, they make that... what's that TV show where they're all homophobes? Duck something? Duck Hunters?
Oh, Duck Dynasty or Duck Dynasty.
That's the one. They look like that.
Well, in fact, two of our characters actually turn up in a pickup truck with 2 American flags flying from the top. And I think they actually enter the movie by jumping a creek in their pickup truck. And I think they're actually sort of going... Yahoo! As they arrive, you almost expected Boss Hogg to actually hop out of the truck.
You're waiting for it to freeze and go, those hazard boys.
Oh, I know. So look, this film really does have a bit of everything. So yeah, look, definitely check it out. Definitely check it out. Quick break, and we'll be right back.
I worked in the garden center, and a lady came in, and we had the flowers and the plants, and she asked me how much the chlamydias were.
The Only Funny to Us podcast, available now at onlyfunnytous.com.
Well, the next film I thought we might talk about, and once again, it's one that I've mentioned before, but, in the old style of the show, didn't really have a proper chance to really, dissect these films or laugh at these films or whatever it is that we, choose to do. But this one is The Circle, which I think was mentioned on the very first podcast. But just by myself, it was a little bit difficult to really get into the depth of this, I think, for a B-grade, if you like, direct-to-video, whatever you want to call it, movie. This is absolutely brilliant, and I love it so much. So yes, The Circle from 2015. Now, it was directed by Aaron Hahn and Mario Mosconi, who also wrote the movie. And I'll give you a quick rundown. Yep, quick rundown, and then Gary and I'll sort of try to cut it into small bite-sized pieces. Now, basically, our film starts with a group of people who suddenly appear in a room, all standing in a circle, surrounding this sort of, what looks like this giant button or something, sort of in the middle of the room. And they suddenly all wake up. They're standing on these little, sort of boxes, if you like, and they can't move off them. Little alarms start to go off if they do. Then as they start to wake up, start to talk to each other, start to work out, oh my God, where are we? What's going on? Every few minutes, somebody gets zapped by this device, which is in the middle of the circle. If they try to move off the circle, they start to get zapped. Even if they do absolutely nothing, within a couple of minutes, somebody will randomly get zapped. And they are trying to work out, obviously, why they are there, who has put them there, Why are they being zapped? And our movie, of course, starts to develop along these lines, where they realise that what they're doing is via their hand motions, they're actually voting for somebody to be zapped. In other words, to eliminate somebody from what really is appearing to be a competition every couple of minutes. Our story then, of course, starts to become one of survival. If this is sort of like a game show, if you like, or whatever it is, surely one person is going to be left at the end and they're going to become the winner. So how do you survive? Do you even want to survive? Should you protect somebody else? It becomes a fascinating sort of statement, I think, in many ways about modern society. And this is definitely one film that we cannot give the ending away to. Okay, so don't worry, there will be no spoiler to the end of this, because the ending of this, trust me, you won't get it. It'll surprise you. It really will surprise you. So, your thoughts, my friend?
Well, it's the most evil version of the weakest link you can imagine, really, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
That's the best way to describe the room we're in to people who haven't seen it. It's like an episode of The Weakest Link in a circle.
You're spot on, Gary. It's exactly what it's like. So think of The Weakest Link for everyone. I think everyone has seen it or has at least heard of the game show. If you cross it with, I think it was episode 10 of season 1 of the revamped Doctor Who, where they actually were playing The Weakest Link and being zapped.
Yes.
I do wonder whether our filmmakers had actually seen that episode of Doctor Who. But it is. It is the weakest link. But of course, the question for them, of course, is who has brought them there? Because they start discussing at first, like, is this a government experiment or is it aliens? They really don't know. And
it is actually one of the most clever movies I have seen in years. I sort of put it up in the same sort of category as the movie Cube from the 90s, which had a very similar sort of feel to it. It's very, it does make you think, and it does make you question the human race as a whole.
It's a great statement, I think, about modern society. I think especially to like what's happening in I should rephrase that, in Western society anyway. What's happening right now, I mean, we see it in the US election. I think we've seen it in our own elections, where we tend to be talking a lot about subjects that we were never talking about 10 years ago. And this movie, I think, sums all of that up. It sums up a lot of our fears. It sums up an us and them sort of mentality, which is definitely developing in the Western world. It is a great statement, about the West. Although I think the movie is probably trying to make more of a statement about the United States. But I think it could be transplanted to Australia, Great Britain, Austria, Sweden. I don't think it really matters. I think it transplants itself very well.
Yeah.
Just the other thing too I found fascinating about it, and is that as our film progresses, there are two characters who are absolutely central to this film, and that is a young pregnant woman and a young girl who I think is meant to be about 6 years old, 7 years old, something like that, I think. And the group starts to split, and this is actually where I think your insight, Gary, would be fantastic, because you almost get a Big Brother reality TV show feel to this, where they start to actually form alliances.
Yes, they do.
And there is this idea of one group who become all about self-preservation. They're all about their own survival. So they need to knock off or vote for, so they will be killed, the person who is the greatest threat to them, so to keep them alive and keep them going. But then you have the second group, who have basically decided that they will sacrifice their lives in order to keep the young girl and the pregnant woman alive, because they feel they're the most deserving to live. So they have to try to knock off the self-preservation people, if you like. And so you've got this dueling battle between the two of them. And I just find that absolutely fascinating, the way they did literally divide into two quite equal groups.
Mm-hmm. So the film as a whole, you can't take your eyes off it. It sort of grabs you from the second it starts. I don't know whether that's because we're so sort of trained these days to focus on game shows and reality TV that it looks familiar to us. I don't know whether it's because of that, but it does grab you. You sort of. I mean, I rolled a cigarette when I first pressed play on it, when I first watched it. That cigarette was still there rolled by the end, because I'd forgotten that I'd even rolled it. I was just staring at the screen. I could not take my eyes off it.
I couldn't agree more. When I hadn't actually heard a lot about this movie at all until I actually first saw it. And I sort of thought, it's going to be probably pretty cheap, maybe pretty nasty. In fact, I think it was made as a direct Netflix movie, is that right?
Yes, it was. Yes. I mean, that's where I discovered it the first time. I just thought, I'll put this on.
And I really thought I would put this on just as a bit of a filler one night, just to see what it was about. And I, like you, Gary, became transfixed. I couldn't stop watching it, especially too, is you just never know who's going to live or die in this movie, because there's no, like, in a normal movie, you have a structure of your highest ranking cast down to your lowest. And you know that we start to, as we kill off actors, we start to work our way from the bottom of the list up to the top.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't work like that. Everybody is equal, and you never know who is actually going to be alive in the next 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, and even to the extent you can have somebody giving a very great, passionate speech, and you think, this is going to become one of the leaders, one of the role models of our movie, and then suddenly, zap, they're gone.
Yeah.
It
does make you question what you would do as well throughout the whole process. It does make you think a lot about yourself and society. We're making it sound a bit boring by saying that, but trust us, it isn't. It is gripping stuff.
Absolutely, it's a great statement. I mean, when we think about some of the reasons they start to bring up for whether people should be allowed to live or die, so who they should vote for. Now, I think one of the first ones is they start to vote for the very oldest.
Yeah.
So they start to go. But then it gets to a stage where they realise, well, hang on, you're knocking off somebody in their 80s. If you keep following this path, what's then next? 70s, 60s, 50s, 30s?
Yeah.
And so they put a sort of a stop to that. But then they bring up all sorts of other sort of rationales. For instance, one of the ones I loved, which I thought is so poignant to society right now, is are they legal or illegal immigrants?
Yes.
And they actually start to vote on that. Also, there's a soldier in this who's just returned from Afghanistan. And it's interesting how respectful they are to him until it's a question between him or them. And then suddenly their respect for the military is all out the window. They couldn't care less. It's fascinating, to watch, and also what levels people will go to for self-preservation. Because we should bring up, of course, two people in there who are married.
Yes.
Or are they married?
Dum, dum, dum.
We won't say. We won't say. But it's interesting how that storyline plays out.
Very.
So also, what's a justification for keeping yourself alive? Now, there's a character in this who he's almost a bit Trumpian, actually, I would sort of say.
Yeah. A bit. It is.
Just a bit, yes. Well, there's actually two characters in this, actually. There's one who you wouldn't maybe expect to be Trumpian. He's looks like a golf player, an older gentleman, but his whole rationale for the reason why he must stay alive is because he has made so much money, therefore he's contributed the most to society.
Yeah.
And that I found really, really interesting. It wasn't about how much good he'd done, like had he saved a life, had he helped the poor. His rationale was that he was a good person because he'd made money.
Yeah.
And that was very Trumpian, I thought.
It was very, very Trumpian.
And then, of course, we have an accountant, I think he's meant to be. No, he's a stockbroker. And he, of course, then, the homophobia comes out, where they start to then question the idea, should a homosexual be allowed to live?
Yeah.
And I found this, it just shows all of the horribleness of society, which we try to hide often, we try to keep, or we don't like to talk about. But
sort of pretend it doesn't exist.
Yes, it's like, it's what's that terrible statement, I have nothing against homosexuals. One of my best friends is a homosexual. But...
Yes, I'm not racist, my dog is black. Okay.
Yes, and it's interesting how, anything that these people can find which moves against the mainstream of society, they find as a reason to maybe, to kill them. So if they're a homosexual, that's enough of a reason. If they are an illegal immigrant, that's a reason to kill them. The other thing too is that we have one gentleman in this who never speaks. He never speaks.
Just like I did then. Yeah, I did a good impersonation.
And you did it so well, Gary.
Well, thanks.
But so he plays the whole path that if he stays quiet enough, people will not notice him, and he'll slip through
sort
under
of
the radar.
the Big Brother equivalent of a floater.
Yes.
Stay in the background. Everybody else will make themselves more of a target than you.
And it actually works because we don't even see him until really almost near the end of the movie.
It's quite that even as viewers, we don't realise he's there until he appears.
No. He's sort of like hiding in the background. But the other interesting thing too is to keep these the pregnant woman and the child alive. The ones who have decided that they will sacrifice their lives in order to keep them alive, they have to play this game, as we're sort of saying, Big Brother style. They must keep a certain number of them alive for as long as possible, because without them, they lose their voting bloc to knock out the self-preservationists.
Yep.
So it's very interesting that you have a situation where people have decided that they're going to die, but they still have to keep themselves alive to actually take the other people out. So it's
human nature at best, people.
So you've got this game of strategy as well as it's an absolutely fascinating movie, and as I said, we can't give the end away because all I will say is that one of the things we learn about this movie is you can't vote for yourself. Okay, so you have to actually have the only way to self-sacrifice yourself is to basically have everyone else agree to vote for you, so you get zapped. You can't actually vote for yourself.
Or to step off the platform.
Quite correct. You can step off the platform. And the thing is that the question is continually, or definitely starts to be asked as our cast starts to thin out. And that is that what happens when the two of them are left, the young girl and the pregnant woman? What's going to happen? Because if they vote for each other, it'll be a tie. So how is this actually going to play out in the end? And I would love to tell everybody how it ends, but I can't.
It's so hard to talk about this film without giving away huge spoilers throughout. I'm sitting here trying to think of ways to word things.
I know. But the one thing definitely I think we have to say is that get onto Netflix and watch this movie. Obviously, if you've got a Netflix account, it costs you nothing because you're paying, every month anyway. So it's a freebie. Go and watch.
And it's a relatively short movie as well.
It only goes for about an hour and 10 minutes or hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a long one. Look, all I can really say is that I haven't met anybody who's watched this film that hasn't been quite drawn in by it, quite stunned by it. As I said, with our love of reality TV these days, with what's going on, in the Western world, right now, this movie makes so much sense, and I think, I think everyone will love it.
Yeah, it's one that has to be seen and evaluated on its own merits.
Oh, most definitely. So definitely check it out. The Circle from 2015. As we said, readily available on Netflix, and it's on Australian Netflix. So that means it'll be on Botswanan Netflix. If you can get it here.
It's on UK Netflix as well, I can tell you that, and it's also on the US one.
Yeah, so you'll be able to find it, without any problems at all. And if you can't, just remember there are things called VPNs. I don't want to say any more than that. Just there are.
Find one. If you find one that works with the US, could you please pass it my way? Thank you.
It's ridiculous. You can find a VPN that, like, you live in Australia, you can find a VPN that works for Canada, but you can't find one that works for the US.
It's like I have one that works for CBS Access, which I do pay for to watch my Big Brother US live feeds, but it just doesn't work with Netflix.
No, it's terrible. I knew a guy that actually did this running battle with Netflix, where he actually would he'd find one that worked, and he'd run it for a week, and then it would stop. So he'd go and get another one. It'd work for a week. It'd stop. It's almost like, I reckon there's a battle going on between the VPN providers and sort of Netflix themselves.
Oh, definitely.
It's almost, but I think YouTube does the same thing, don't they, as well?
Yeah, they do, but YouTube's easier to get through.
Yes, it's not a hard one. So, look, definitely check it out, The Circle. You will not be disappointed. Now, our third movie for this podcast is a movie I've been wanting to talk about for ages, because this one is so good. It's called Iron Sky, from 2012. And it was directed by Timo. Now, I'm going to try to do this because my Finnish isn't fantastic. Vorensla, I think it is. Stars Julia. Oh, now, how do you reckon you pronounce this surname, Gary?
See, I'm going for Dietz.
Or Dietz, maybe.
It's Julia Dietze.
So, yeah, obviously, Gary and my school boy German was never up to scratch. So, but anyway, she is one of our stars. Also, Chris Kirby, Götz Otto, Peter Sargent, Sophie Paul, and Udo. Oh, what's Udo's surname again, Gary?
Udo Kier, the legend. Kier. Udo Kier.
Yes, who I think a lot of you will remember from James Bond. Wasn't the world is? Which James Bond film was it again? The one with set in China with the newspapers.
You know the one.
Yes, but he's played a Bond villain anyway, so that give you an idea. He's played.
I'm looking it up now just to put people's minds at rest.
He's played a Bond villain anyway. So, and also Götz Otto. He's another German actor who has just played villain after villain after villain in so many movies, and the two of them are fantastic as a villainous duo. I suppose you would say in this film. Now. It's from 2012, as I said, and what's interesting about this is that it's actually a German, Australian, and Finnish co-production, and you'll definitely start to feel that when you watch this movie. I think about the only American stuff in this film is where it was shot, and a couple of the actors. All of the writers, the director, the producer, everything, the money, it all came from Australia, Germany, and Finland. Now, it plays with this old story of what happened to the die-hard Nazis in 1945. Now, we've heard we get lots of movies like this, where, Nazi gold hidden away in tunnels, or, the Nazis all ran away to Argentina, or, that they went off and they made a base in Antarctica or something like that. Well, this one...
I do love a Nazi movie.
Oh, yes. Especially Nazi zombies. That's even better. Black Snow.
Or,
was it Black Snow?
Or Ilsa, She-Woman of the SS.
The classic. Oh my goodness, that was fantastic. But anyway, this one plays with the idea that a hardened core of Nazis escaped to the dark side of the moon. They had developed space travel in 1945, and instead of using all of that technology to actually win the war, instead what they did is they took a hardcore of Nazis and escaped to the dark side of the moon and build a giant moon base. Now, in modern times, our film starts with a moon landing where the United States decides to go back to the moon. And it goes with 2 astronauts who land there, and suddenly who they encounter is not what they were expecting. Yes, they encounter Nazis. And one of them is killed. In fact, we don't even get to see him. He's just blown away straight away. And Chris Kirby is taken away by the Nazis, and he is then taken to their hideout on the dark side of the moon, where, to their absolute horror, they find out that the American astronaut is black. And this, of
it's
course,
probably one of the greatest comedy reveals I've ever seen in an exploitation Nazi movie.
Because we don't even know he's black at this stage. So, and of course, because they're Nazis, you can imagine, this is a Jesse Owens moment. They're actually really, really quite horrified by this. And the whole idea of the fact that he's black does play through the movie, with obviously the racism of Nazis and so forth all the way through.
But not in an ugly or uncomfortable way. It's a tongue-in-cheek way.
No, it's done in a very humorous way. There's no doubt about that. Now, one of the things that they actually find on him is his iPhone, if I'm not mistaken, iPhone or iPad,
yes,
that he's carrying. And they realise that this thing has enough power, computer power, to basically, finally get their giant Destructor spaceship operational, so they can reconquer the Earth and reform, I suppose, the Fourth Reich, if you like. And but
seriously, I'm laughing at the description, but yet it's genius. It's as good as it sounds.
Well, it's because the spaceship is almost clockwork, isn't it? I mean, in the way it sort of works. And he meets up with one of our other main stars, Julia Dietz, as we'll just call her, I think, and who is she's a devout Nazi, but she's this, I suppose, what you would call this 3rd generation of Nazi, where Nazism has sort of cooled, if you might want to say it. She's been brought up on this sort of very edited version of Nazism, where she actually thinks Nazism is a good thing. It helps people. Nazism is the way to make the world better. And when she realises that Chris Kirby is black, her father, a mad scientist, turns him white. And they actually think that they're doing him a favour. And the amazing thing about this movie is for about 3/4 of it, he actually plays it as a white man.
He does.
Which is really quite funny to see. But then, anyway, what happens is that the Führer, he's not meant to be Hitler, he's just meant to be the current Führer, who gets Otto, decides to send Julia and Udo back to Earth to, how would you say it, I suppose, to get more iPhones, basically.
Yes, pretty much, to get as many Apple products as possible to power their spaceship.
And then to take them back to the moon. But when they arrive there, they find that the Earth is not obviously the way that they imagined the Earth. They're still picturing an Earth of 1945, not an Earth of the thousands. And they get caught up in American politics. It's when they actually meet our next 2 characters, Peter Sargent, who is meant to be, I suppose, the president's personal advisor, and Stephanie Paul, who plays the president. Now, Stephanie Paul as the president, this is absolutely amazing because she is the spitting image and the way she talks of Sarah Palin.
The worrying thing as well is the movie's set in 2018, so we've only got another year to go.
Yes. But she plays it so well as Sarah Palin. I mean, I swear she even says "drill, baby, drill." I think
she does. She actually does.
Yeah, in one stage of the movie. So it is absolutely great. And but Julia and Chris meet back up when they're on Earth, and he shows her what Nazism is really about, and it's that it's not this friendly, wonderful, political way of life. It's in fact evil. It's dark. It's absolutely horrible. And she actually then becomes an anti-Nazi because she's obsessed with the movie The Great Dictator. But all she's ever seen is a highly Nazised edited version where she sees Hitler as being a good person, not as an actual bad person. And when she finally sees the full movie, she realises how bad Nazism is, and then she becomes one of the good characters rather than the bad ones.
Yeah.
And I suppose just to sum
I
up,
always thought that she had it in her from the beginning, though, because I mean, she does help the black guy out a lot at the beginning.
well,
It's always been there, but she needed that moment of realization.
I think so, because when, for instance, they turn him white, she does it like she's doing him a favour. Once she realises that he doesn't want to be white, he's proud to be black, she doesn't actually have a problem with that. She she treated racism in some sort of reverse concept. She's not actually racist. She just thought that she was doing him a favour. It's a weird sort of thing. And once she realises that she's not doing him a favour, yeah, she changes instantly. But I suppose I'll just quickly just give you sort of how this film sort of goes, and then we can talk about it a bit more. Is that they then travel back to the moon, and they decide it's now time to launch an invasion against the Earth. But the president, Sophie Paul, realises that there's this product that they're storing and they use for power on the moon, which is called helium-3. And America wants to get the full rights to helium-3 and doesn't want to let any other country get its hands on it. And so we end up basically with the Earth going to war with the Nazis on the moon. And then, of course, we have our huge climactic battle. And what happens from then on is very interesting. But look, we won't get it away. Or give it away, I should say. So, look, I thought this movie was absolutely brilliant. I mean, what are your thoughts, Gary?
Well, it's one of those films that people have been telling me to watch for years, and it ended up being in my to-watch pile, and I didn't bother with it. And then I found the Blu-ray dirt cheap. I thought I picked it up not long ago. And I put it on to watch the Blu-ray, and I was actually blown away by how good it actually was. I mean, it's a film that needs to be more known. I think, unfortunately, at the moment, it's stuck in a cult sort of area, but this needs a mainstream release. It really does, because especially I think I watched it at the perfect time as well, because with America being in a presidential race at the moment as it is, it just felt a bit too realistic at times. But it was it was amazing. I've got nothing bad about the movie at all. It's actually hard for me to critique it because of how good it is.
I think one of the reasons why it works so well is that although it's set in America, it's about America. Because it's not made by Americans, it has a very different viewpoint. You know, it's like whenever countries make movies about themselves, they always portray themselves how they want to be seen. Where, of course, this movie portrays America more about the way foreigners see America rather than about the way Americans see themselves. And I think it works so well like that because, as you said, you know, it's a black comedy. It's not meant to be too serious, even though it is serious.
It's very self-parodying.
I mean, one of the things is that Peter Sargent, as you said, plays the presidential advisor. But in the end, she gets promoted to commander of the Earth Space Fleet. And don't ask me how that happens. It just happens.
It's all those random little Iron Sky moments. You just got to go with it.
But she turns up on the bridge of the American spaceship, which is called, you believe it or not, the George W. Bush. But she's dressed more like, I don't know, a Dame Edna Everage. She has these war outfits that she sort of has created. And
I have to admit, though, they're fabulous.
Oh.
They really are fabulous outfits. A drag queen would be proud of those outfits.
They are so good, but it's like she actually spends more time. I mean, I think there's a scene in it where she actually talks to the president about what she's going to wear during the
Yes.
battle, which is just so funny. But the other thing too we should explain is that we said the American spaceship, the George W. Bush. It turns out that every country on Earth has actually built its own spaceship, but they've built them in secret. And they've also armed them all, which of course is totally against anyone that knows anything about human history. Armaments are illegal in space. There was a document signed between, I'm not too sure, I think it was some Russian premier and some American president at one stage, going back into the 1970s. And so anyway, they've broken the rules and they've armed all of their spaceships. But when they're sitting around the UN, and I think the President of the United States sort of says, all right, hands up, who actually broke the rules, who armed this spaceship? And every country puts up their hand except for one. And it's Finland.
Yes.
Finland, who sits back and says, well, I'm sorry, we followed the rules.
Which is quite refreshing because usually it's Canada.
I know. I don't even think Canada gets mentioned in this film, to be truthful. I know Britain does. I know North Korea does. China does. In fact, isn't it whenever something goes wrong, North Korea puts up their hands and takes ownership for it?
Yes.
And they sort of say,
Not the same way that ISIS does now. It's like you could fart in a room and ISIS go, we did that. It's that kind of thing.
It's exactly right. I mean, every time, like if a bomb goes off, North Korea will sort of say, "Oh, we did that," and then the entire United Nations starts laughing and sort of says, "North Korea, no, we know it wasn't you."
I learned an interesting fact about this film.
Yes, please tell.
It was actually crowdfunded. 10% of the I've got the official statement here that more than 10% of the funding for this film came from fans. And all the donors are listed in the end credits.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Iron Sky is the movie that brings people together. It's the secret to world peace, Iron Sky.
Well, is that the reason that I know that we've been tempted now for a couple of years, and I think there was even a promo made about Iron Sky 2.
Mm-hmm. Which is definitely coming.
Yeah, but we haven't heard anything more about it since the promo.
It is definitely coming. I can't tell you sources and things, but there has been rumblings and stirrings about Iron Sky 2.
And is it
the Nazis are coming back?
And is it going to be set in the centre of the Earth?
I cannot tell you that because I don't know myself.
Okay.
I just know that it's coming.
Just what I've heard is that they're going to go one step further with Iron Sky 2, and it will be set in the centre of the Earth, and it will not only have Nazis this time, it'll also have dinosaurs.
Awesome. But the thing is, I mean, as we are a B movie show, we can point out another one. But Nazis at the centre of the Earth has already happened. I think it's happened several times. There was when Dead Snow came out, there was a low-budget parody called Nazis at the Centre of the Earth, or Bloodstorm, it was called in the UK.
Oh, but there's so many of these. I mean, there's so many Nazi movies of hidden Nazis or zombie Nazis, but I think one of the things that's so different about Iron Sky is that it actually had a budget.
Yes, it did. I mean, the effects in it are absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, the spaceships look great, and
I don't know about you, but I went in expecting something a lot cheaper. And then once you suddenly saw the whole layout of the dark side of the moon, I was like, bloody hell, that's amazing.
I mean, we have to let you know that, as we're saying, the special effects are so good. The spaceships look great. The Nazi space city looks absolutely great. Oh,
it's also shaped like a swastika.
I know, I was going to say, it is just fantastic. I love the way, too, that the Sarah Palin character is always walking on her treadmill in the office.
Yes.
And always sort of in her tracksuit, sort of exercising and all the rest of it. And it's also uncanny just how similar Stephanie Paul actually got herself to look like Sarah Palin.
It is. I mean, another thing I'm going to point out, it's not really that much of a spoiler because it just works more as part of the comedy of the film as opposed to the main plot, but it also shows a similarity between Nazism, is that how you say it? Nazism?
And, Nazism, yeah.
And American politics as it is now. The similarity between the two is actually so scary that even the characters in the film can't work out that they're doing the Nazis' bidding.
Well, we spoke before about The Circle, obviously saying how, it's looking at modern society, but you're quite right in this one, the similarities, even though this was made obviously long before the current American election that we're slowly plodding through, even as non-Americans at the moment. But yeah,
don't worry, the end is in sight. Not long now, people.
What is it, 90 days away, I think, or something? Please let it be over. I don't, at the stage, I don't care who wins. Just let it be over. Please. I'm being Australian. I'm used to an election campaign actually lasting, maybe 6 weeks, 5 weeks, not 2 years.
That's the thing, as well as this is a good time to promote it. Really, if you are sick of seeing the American electoral coverage, watch Iron Sky for a new view of how how stupid it all is. And every time you'll see a speech from either Hillary or Trump in the next few days after you've seen Iron Sky, you will laugh. Guaranteed, you will laugh because that's all you'll be able to think about is Iron Sky.
Because it's interesting how they actually use Otto's character. And also Julia, and they actually, as you said just before, they revamp Nazism and try to sell it to the American public, as Gary just said.
Yeah.
But it is, and I know I'm actually just really repeating what you said, but it is so incredibly sort of scary in the sense that you watch that and you sort of think, oh, it's black shirts, it's brown shirts, it's Italy 1920s all over again. And then you look at the way they do it, and you sort of think, it's actually not much different to what certain politicians in America are actually doing right now.
It really shows up American politics for what it is, Iron Sky does.
And I think that's the reason why this movie could never have been made by Americans. It had to be made by foreigners. And that's why it works just so incredibly well.
It's an amazing piece of observational comedy that they took in.
Oh yeah, I absolutely just adore this movie. And also Chris Kirby and Stephanie Paul are actually American actors, but all the rest of our cast are basically German, Finnish, or Australian. Peter Sargent is of course Australian. Udo and Gertz Otto? They're German. Julia Dietz. Did we agree on Dietz? Was that it?
Dietz.
She's German as well. So it's got a the cast. Like basically, if you're meant to be German in this film, you're played by a German. If you're meant to be Finnish in this film, you're played by a Finn. The Americans are sort of played half by Americans, half by Australians. But the Australians all play Americans. There's no actual. I think the only Australian you ever actually see in this. Well, I don't think you see any actually. Although we do, of course, obviously because Australia is a part of this movie. One of the spaceships, in fact, one of the major spaceships in this is actually called. What was it called again? I think it's called the Dundee.
Yeah, it's in Crocodile Dundee.
Which is a little bit like, oh, God, did you really have to call it that? And I think it quite literally, when it appears in the battle for the first time, they quite literally come on sort of saying, good on you, Cobber, here we are, we're here to help out, mate.
Yeah.
It's so cliche, but it's done really, really well. I can't speak highly enough about Iron Sky. It's, as we said, it's a black comedy, but you'll see a lot of very serious subjects actually being talked about. And also, once again, won't give away the ending, but what happens in the end of this movie, I think, is very, very poignant, especially at the moment where we're looking at situations where, especially in the United States, where at the moment there are two people who are, one of which is going to be president, and there is no real trust for either of those two people going into that office. And when you have a look at how this film ends, it makes you wonder just how close to what they're talking about in this movie are we. Are we approaching that moment very quickly ourselves? So it's absolutely fascinating. So,
but also with all of its sort of dark themes that it does touch upon in the movie, it's nowhere near exploitative. It never feels offensive. It never feels... I don't know, it just never feels angry or anything like that. It is a genuinely fun movie. It's basically just laughing at themselves and having fun whilst doing it. And I think it shows clearly that they were all having a ball when they were making this film.
One of the things I love about it is that when there are two SS guards who bring the Führer down to Earth in a spaceship, and they're guarding the spaceship while the Führer goes off, to find out two of our cast members. And they find a modern-day Playboy. And their only discussion in it is about they cannot believe... Well, they've never experienced, we'll just say, the Brazilian.
Yes.
And they're just absolutely obsessed.
It's one of those funny things that Iron Sky does do. I mean, it's got like little sort of characters which wouldn't normally get a speaking role, sort of like the stormtroopers in Star Wars, where it just cuts to them having a really funny conversation about what they've just seen in like modern day Earth. And it cuts away again.
It is, yeah. I've got nothing bad to say about this movie, and as you said, Gary, it's even though it deals with some pretty dark topics, it does it in such a way that it either makes a point about where we are as society, or it makes a point about where we were in the past, or it just takes the total piss out of it.
Yeah.
And I just love it. I've nothing bad to say about this one at all.
No.
So, there we go. All right, quick break, and we will be right back.
Oh, we're just careening on the track. It's going to be a long edit. That's staying in there. Okay.
The Only Funny to Us podcast with brand new episodes every Monday night at 8 at onlyfunnytous.com.
Well, our final movie for podcast number 8 is one that I have to admit, it was actually Gary who told me about this movie. I hadn't actually heard about it before, and it came from one of our conversations one night when talking about a movie that we both love, which is Unfriended. And Gary actually said, well, you've got to check out this other movie, and I did, and it's called The Den. Although, I believe, Gary, in the UK anyway, it's actually called Hacked. Is that correct?
It's called Hacked, and it was originally released first in Russia called Death Online.
And there's another interesting point about it. So if we're in interesting points about The Den, is it was released a year earlier in Russia than it was in the US, even though it's a US movie.
Yeah.
It was released in 2013 in Russia and then 2014 in the United States, which I still don't know why. I'm sure there's obviously...
I'm not sure either. I mean, I can't understand why Russia was predominantly the main audience for this.
Well, maybe Trump and Putin had a bit of a conversation, something like that. Who knows?
I also wonder whether it was held back because of Unfriended.
That actually makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of similarities. Although they're very different movies, but of course, I think you could, if you just did a quick review of it, you could think they were very similar. But they are very, very different. They are very, very different. And we'll explain why right now. Now, it was directed by Zachary Donahue and stars Melanie Papilana, I think her name is, who plays a character called Elizabeth. And it is pretty much her movie. She's 90% of the movie, I suppose you would say. And it is, it's not really found footage, but it's shot in found footage style.
Yeah, it still counts as found footage, but it's sort of a modern equivalent. It's sort of like using technology as the camera as opposed to somebody holding a physical camera.
That's right. And that's where I think that similarity with Unfriended obviously comes from. But this movie isn't... spooky hocus pocus type demonic possession ghosts and so forth, like Unfriended. This is actually more about what we do to ourselves as people, as in evil people, hacking our computers and whether, stealing identities and all that sort of thing. So we'll give you a quick rundown and then we'll talk about it. Now, Elizabeth, our main character, basically gets a university grant to spend, I think it's 1 month on a sort of web chat site. Is that what you would call it, Gary? Sort of like...
yes, it's sort of like chat roulette.
Yes. And she's going to spend a month on that, doing nothing but that. She won't leave the house. She will just spend all of her time randomly talking to these people, making new friends, seeing what's there. And then she's going to basically write a thesis about, I suppose, modern interaction on the internet.
Yeah.
Is probably the best way to put it. But it starts off sort of pretty well. She goes through all that normal sort of stuff where, you get the funny videos, you get, somebody basically flashing, showing their junk. You get people trying to spook her and, with little games and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty much what you expect. She also makes a couple of good friends. And there's one friend that she does make, a British girl, who you just think is a random connection. But towards the end of the movie, the connection with her is going to be vitally important. But we'll just leave it at that. So when she comes up, it's a British girl, when you're watching it, when they're having their chat, remember who that person is, because it's going to come back into the movie.
You will recognise her by her boyfriend dancing behind her in this shot.
Yes, for any women out there, or for any, I suppose, gays out there, anyone who appreciates the male body, put it that way, you're going to like the little dance routine he does behind the camera. Now, it starts to then go a little bit wrong when Elizabeth and it's her stepsister, isn't it? She's meant to be.
I think it is, yeah, if I remember correctly.
And they go off to a cafe, but she's still got her laptop with her, so she's still basically logged into the den. And they, before that, she's with them having a bit of a girls' night, and a video pops up, one of these, click here if you want to see this video. And her stepsister does... No, I'm getting myself a little bit confused here, aren't I, Gary?
Yeah, you're getting a little bit muddled up here.
The stepsister pisses off the person on the other end. That's what happens. And then they, which of course our main star, Elizabeth, is not aware has actually happened. They go off to a cafe and then she clicks on a link that this guy has sent. Well, at least we think it's a guy. She thinks it's a girl. We don't really know who it is. And she witnesses a murder. At least what she thinks is a murder. And quite a vicious, murder of a young woman. Now, she takes this to the police. The police don't really believe her. They sort of think that it's probably just, people trying to scare her. It's the internet. You enter the internet sort of at your own risk and, don't really worry about it. But then,
and it's also been established earlier on as well, where she is the victim of a prank that's very similar.
Yes,
online.
Yes, that is very true. But then things then start to go very, very weird. We can clearly see that somebody has now taken control of her computer, is emailing her friends, is phoning her friends, is getting, making communication with her friends, making them think that it's actually her talking to them when it's not. And then her friends start to disappear, is probably the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
But the police still don't really believe her. But then the more and more and more this film goes on, we realise that there's a lot more happening here. This is not just somebody who's playing a prank with her. She has entered what we've talked about before on this podcast, the dark web.
The dark web.
The dark web. Would that be a good way to explain it?
Yes, I would say so. It's a tough one to sort of try and put in words. It works better when you're sort of flowing through it on your own free will. But once again, it's another one of those films that holds a mirror up to society. You don't realise how many cameras you actually have on you at any given time until you watch this movie. I mean, I was sitting there in my room when I was watching it going, okay, there's my computer, there's my phone, there's the iPad, everything's got a camera on it these days. That film relishes in that.
It definitely makes you realise that, I know that there was a photograph that was circulated, I think it might have been last year, of Bill Gates sitting in front of a notebook with a piece of sticky plaster over his camera.
Yeah.
And I think it does just go to show that, like you're saying, with so many cameras in our lives these days, it's, are we ever really safe?
TVs have cameras for Skype, you know. It's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, it's like you said, when I look around right now, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cameras in one room.
Mm-hmm.
That's just because there's a couple of iPads, a phone, 2 laptops, you know, and what about now? They're even making televisions with inbuilt cameras.
Yeah.
You know, so you can Skype and so forth via your television. So it is quite amazing just how open we are to.
This film exposes that, and it does make you very conscious of it afterwards.
I'll put it to you this way, that after you've watched this movie, you will be putting sticky plaster over all of the cameras on your devices. Because it's not just, this movie goes down a path of, it's not just hacking your system so you can, you know, steal bank account details or, you know, do any of this sort of thing. This movie gets much darker, where people's lives start to be affected, even to the extent of life and death. And where, once again, don't want to give the ending away to this, but I was not expecting this movie to go where it went.
No, not at all. I mean, it's very reminiscent of sort of like the sort of 90s thriller phase that happened in America, where you had all these like thrillers where it's basically a game of cat and mouse between the protagonist and the bad guy. It is a game of cat and mouse, this film.
And even when you think towards the end of this movie, where you think that she might actually be winning, she's not.
It's not.
It's you know, it's, you never really quite know. And also, is this one person or is it maybe more people?
Yeah.
It's and the very, very last scene of this film, which, as I promise, I will not give away, it will really make you think twice, because it's very, very. I'll try to explain this without giving it away too much. You can make a movie about a horror genre where someone is hunted, where people are killed, and all the rest of it. And how do you survive? How do you, as the good person, take out the bad person before they can take you out? Been done in 101 million horror movies before. But the very ending about this isn't so much about the good person and the bad person. It then makes a statement about us, the viewer.
Yeah. And
that is what I found so amazing. And it's only, in the last 90 seconds of the movie?
Yeah.
And that, so, you know...
I mean, I don't get unnerved very often with horror movies. I've seen thousands of things, you know, I've seen so many now that I'm completely desensitized. This film creeped me out. It really, really did. There was something about this film that was so unnerving and lifelike that it sent shivers down my spine. Because, I mean, I've been on all these things, you know, like I was the same with Unfriended. I mean, it's all stuff we use every day. It's stuff we constantly have access to.
I think one of the differences, what scared me, I suppose, about Unfriended, although I have to admit, I find it pretty hard to get scared by a movie these days. I remember as a teenager watching Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist, for the very first time.
Yeah.
I swear I couldn't sleep for a week after watching that. But I think I was 14 or something when I saw it for the first time. Now if I watch Poltergeist, it's a bit like, oh yeah, whatever. You know. But the thing about this movie is that it could be real.
Yeah, the thing that affected me the most was the fact that I as I suffer from agoraphobia, I'm scared to leave the house. A lot of what I do is online. A lot of my interacting is online. This is a world that I know well, and it really made me question it.
And the other thing too, it's whereas with Unfriended, because it's Unfriended is meant to be like a ghost who's re-entered the world via the internet.
More movie.
A
revenge movie.
Yes,
Unfriended is.
yes. But it's a spirit. It's a ghost. You know, right? But so the thing is, you can watch that, and it can make you jump. But you don't actually sort of sit back so much and sort of think, right, that could really happen.
Yeah.
But the thing about the Den is that you're sitting there sort of thinking, that could really happen. You know, somebody really could steal my life, use all of my devices to then hunt down my friends and me.
Yeah.
And it becomes so very, very real, where I don't think anyone really sits back and watches, except for maybe, I don't know, a 12-year-old who watches Unfriended who really shouldn't have, would watch Unfriended. And I don't think an adult would sit back and watch Unfriended and sort of say, yeah, that could happen.
Yeah. There was a similar film to The Den that came out last year called Ratter. And I think that was just another one of those Hollywood saw an idea from The Den and just milked it. The same way they did with Repo Men and Repo the Genetic Opera, even though they claim there is no similarity, even though it's completely the same except for the music.
Well, how many movies have we seen We mentioned it earlier on the show, just rip-off after rip-off.
Yes.
After rip-off.
People think it's a low-budget thing. No, Hollywood do it more. Hollywood steal more from the B-movie area than what the B-movie area steals from Hollywood.
Well, it was said, was it a number of years ago, that if it wasn't for Japan, Hollywood wouldn't have a horror movie industry.
No.
The amount of remakes of Japanese horror movies, that were made, what was it, I suppose through the early thousands.
Look at things like The Ring, The Grudge, Dark
Water. And even the other countries that they're starting to steal movies from now as well is Thailand.
Yes.
Because Thailand actually has, a lot of people don't know this, but Thailand has a huge horror industry. They make a very large amount of horror films. And I suppose Thai films, a lot of people, unless you're Thai, you're probably not going to watch a Thai film.
Bollywood is starting to create more and more of them as well, which is fascinating. When you watch a Bollywood horror movie, you'd be all tense. It'd be all dramatic. There's suddenly a musical number, and it's all fabulous. You're like, yes, girl! And then it ends. It's like, all back to being tense again. It's the most bizarre thing, but it works. I love Bollywood. I know,
Bollywood blows my mind. There was a movie I saw on Netflix, actually, only recently, and it was... I can't remember the name of the movie. I would have researched it if I knew we were going to bring it up. But it was set in the early thousands, I think, about a police squad who apparently was just a real police squad in India who were going to take on organised crime and terrorists. But they used such violent tactics in order to do that. They actually eventually were disbanded by the government because they were more violent than the criminals were. But there was apparently a real event that happened in India where there was this huge shootout between a gang of criminals and like about 100 odd police, and they literally just blew the building up and killed these criminals. And it tells the story of this event of the criminal gang and the police trying to hunt them down. But even though it's so serious, like for instance, the criminals will be there talking about killing somebody or plotting their next bank robbery, and then the next minute, suddenly the dancing girls come in and they turn into song and dance.
It's so brilliantly camp and fabulous. Every movie should have it.
And I know, it's fantastic. And then they're singing and dancing and all the rest of it. And then suddenly the dancing girls go away and then they're back at the kitchen table talking about their next bank robbery.
Can you imagine movies like Schindler's List and things if it just randomly stopped and out came a load of dancing girls?
I dread to think... You would hope that there'd be some movies that they'd sort of say, no, we can't do the Bollywood touch.
I think there should be a Bollywood moment in every movie.
It definitely makes them more exciting. There's no doubt about that. But we are getting off points just a little bit. But if you did like, because I think most people have actually seen, like if you enjoy going to the movies, I think people will have seen Unfriended. So if you did like that, I think you will like this. And in many ways, although Unfriended is a little bit more, I suppose, freakier because it's got the supernatural element to it, this you'll find even freakier because it's real.
It's sort of the adult version of Unfriended.
That's exactly right. And the other thing too is that because it's filmed in the same manner as Unfriended, in other words, it's all done through like sort of video cam on your laptop or whatever, that's what we're seeing, it means that you don't get any of that found footage shakiness.
No.
Because I do know that I've spoken to a number of people who say, oh, look, I like found footage movies, but the one thing that turns me off them is the shaky camera work.
Yeah.
And one thing I can promise you is that's not in this movie.
No, that doesn't happen in this. It's actually quite well, it was at the time, an original, an inventive, fresh take on the found footage genre.
We both love found footage. In fact, do you have a favourite found footage movie, Gary?
I have to say Blair Witch. I can't not say Blair Witch. It's sort of the granddaddy of them all.
I suppose it is the granddaddy, but the question is it actually the first found footage movie?
No.
And that's what a lot of people get confused about, don't they?
Yes.
They think
Psycho wasn't the first thriller ever made. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. But it was definitely Blair Witch was the movie that I suppose made found footage sort of a genre everybody wanted to copy. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love it. But the one thing I have to admit is that the one thing about found footage I don't like is if the event gets too big. So because then it becomes unbelievable. And the one found footage movie I have a real problem with, and I know Gary and I are going to disagree on this because I think you really like it, is Cloverfield.
I do. Cloverfield is brilliant. Leave Cloverfield alone.
I'm sorry. I'm still going to continue my online campaign of bullying everybody who had anything to do with Cloverfield. It doesn't make any sense to me because found footage is meant to be that, something has happened and we didn't know about it and we find out about it through the footage. But New York is still standing.
Oh, come on. It was just a found footage version of Godzilla. Leave it alone.
It's one thing I have to admit about it is its special effects are very good. Mm-hmm. Although don't do what I do. The very first time I saw it was actually a pirated version. And I say that too loud. And the colour was so washed out that when they were in the underground, I couldn't see anything. It was just black. So I finally did the right thing and actually bought a copy, even though I think that was like the $15 that I'll never get back. But it's
the first Blu-ray I ever bought.
Oh, really? Was Cloverfield?
I brought two at the same time, but it was I got Cloverfield and I got the Friday the 13th remake. Those were the first two Blu-rays I ever bought.
Oh, pretty good choice there. I'm trying to think what my favourite found footage movie is, and I really don't know if I have a favourite. I still love Blair Witch. There's no doubt I absolutely love Blair Witch. But there's been so many, sort of coming out that
There is. I mean, there's so many good ones. I mean, I know it's a love-hate subgenre of horror, but I adore fan footage, and I'll watch any old crap if somebody's holding a video camera. Do you know?
I mean, look, I even loved Apollo 18, which I know got very.
See, that one I couldn't get with that one.
See, I thought that one worked pretty well, actually. In fact, I've often recommended to people if you don't like found footage, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, if you did like found footage, we did like the plague.
I realised I did that backwards, didn't I? No, it's a good one to introduce people to because it's sort of a bit different. What didn't you like about it?
None of it sat well with me at all. I don't know why. Perhaps I've got to give it another go. But I watched it when it first came out, and I really wasn't taken with it at all.
I think the reason why I liked it is that it was science fiction crossed with found footage. So two of my favourite genres sort of put together. And And it was believable. Like you watched it, and it was like, yeah, well, this could have actually have happened. So I, even though we obviously know it never did, because the Apollo rocket that was meant to launch Apollo 18 is actually currently sitting, I think, on display in Florida.
Yes.
But it's but when you watch it, you sort of think to yourself, it could have happened, and that's what I love about found footage. It's when you watch it, that's why Blair Witch was so wonderful, because you're watching that and you sort of thought, yeah, that really could have happened.
Yeah.
And when a movie is like that, that's where I love it. I know the movie. What is it about? The family abduction. I think it's just called Abduction. Is that it starts to get a little bit too out there with all the aliens, you know. We should maybe talk about that film on another time. We're sort of digressing maybe a little bit too much. But I think what I was trying to say is that the reason where I love found footage is where the movie seems believable. Like, it really could have happened, and we are actually watching this stuff for the very first time. And that's why I like The Den. Because I believe that, you know, it really could have happened. With the exception of, obviously, the last 90 minutes, that's a statement on society. But
the last 90 minutes, that's the whole film.
Sorry, the last 90 seconds. Sorry. I've been rambling so much. My mind is a watch of fluid ideas, and it's it's sort of getting away from me. But but no, highly recommend this one. Highly recommend this one. And,
me too.
Yeah, so it's definitely one to watch. Oh, we should just say though,
or is it one to watch you? We'll see what I did there.
Oh no! See, I should have hit just cut when you said that. That would have been a perfect out. Shouldn't it? But I was going to say is that we did, of course, mention that it's called Hat in Britain. It's got a couple of different names, but if you just do a search in your country, you'll find whatever the hell it happens to be called in your country. One thing, though, I have to admit is I do not believe it's available on Netflix.
It was for a time in the US. I don't know whether it still is or not.
But it's definitely available on iTunes. And so if it's on iTunes, because iTunes is totally international, isn't it? So if it's in one country, it's in the other?
Usually. Sometimes there is a few rights issues with different countries, but it's usually from certain film companies, Sony. But
yes. What the company that shall not be mentioned?
But yeah, it should be everywhere. I mean, it's on the UK one, it's on the US one. So,
and if it's on the Australian one, as we said earlier, it'll be on pretty much anywhere. Yeah. Because I think Australia has, pretty much the worst.
The best thing about it being an independent film as well is they want it to go out to as many people as possible. Yes.
No, it's and it's definitely worth it. I remember actually hearing, or not hearing, I should say, reading somebody. I won't mention their name, but actually put up a tweet on Twitter a little while ago on their birthday, and actually said, my one birthday wish is for a US Netflix account.
It's true.
Because it's just, I mean, look, I understand there are all the reasons for this, but why does the rest of the world have to have such shitty Netflix? And America's
I don't think it's not Netflix's fault, unfortunately, though. It's the distribution people. You know, it's the different rights in different countries. I mean, it's the film companies that need to sort their shit out, not Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix were happy to let people do this until the film companies started complaining.
It's almost like region coding, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it is a shame, but look, you know, I mean, businesses have got to look after their bottom dollar, I suppose. But it's
they do, but they'd make more if they just universalised everything.
Oh, look, I know, and just I know a lot of region coding was originally done, wasn't it, to fight sort of Chinese, Hong Kong, Indian movie piracy?
Yeah,
but the thing is, those days are over now. I mean,
they're gone. We're in a completely digital age now. Their laws. Not their laws, all their rules are completely outdated, and it doesn't work with today's society. Because if somebody can't get something that's on, like if you wanted to see something that was on Netflix US, but you only had a UK account and you couldn't watch it, that leads more people to downloading pirate versions. So, you know, well done you, when they could have watched it legally and paid $5.99 for it a month.
it just reminds me. It's like, let's build a wall.
Exactly. I do apologise if you heard a noise. I was taking a swig of Pepsi.
So, but no, definitely check this one out. The Dan hat, whatever it happens to be called, it's worth it. So check it out.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap, basically, for podcast number 8. As I said at the start of the show, apologies that weren't podcasting for a few weeks, but, we were making a few changes.
My fault completely.
Well,
Let's just be honest here. I was poorly.
Well, Gary was a little bit ill, and that is very true.
I apologise.
But we also did a few other things. For instance, I hope you like the new intro that we have. And, of course, have to thank the guys that, as I said at the start of the show, only funny to us, Cliff, TJ, Ben, and Steve. Thank you very much for putting that together. Appreciate it very much. So, of course, remember, if you want to just listen to a wild out there, just funny, talking about nothing except their everyday lives, please check them out on OFTU Podcast on Twitter. You'll find all the links and so forth. They're hilarious and they're really nice guys. Also want to thank Ramona, who has been a real help with software, simply so Gary and I are able to talk to each other and put it out to you. So thank you very much to Ramona for all her help there. You can listen to her podcasts, which of course are Sports Gal Pal and also We Should Not Be Friends. You can find all those links on her Twitter site, which is Sports Gal, G-A-L, Pal, P-A-L, or one word. So please check that out. And, of course, we always want to thank the lovely and charming Alana Evans for letting us use her music, which we will, of course, be doing very shortly. And so please follow her, check her out on Twitter. And, Gary, you've, of course, got some shout-outs there.
I do. It's basically where you can find me. It's like I'm at GJ69 on Twitter. I'm also on bcrising.com. That stands for bodycountrising.com, where I do the horror reviews. And also I'm at Big Brother Radio, not Big Brother, is it Big Brother or Big Bro? It's Big Brother, isn't it? BigBrotherRadio.com.
Yes, it's.
This is good, isn't it? I sound like really professional right now, don't I?
I think isn't the Twitter handle
Big
though
Brother.
is Big Bro Radio though, isn't it?
The Twitter handle's Big Bro Radio. Well done, thank you very much. But BigBrotherRadio.com is where you'll find me, and I want to give a special shout out to one of my bestest friends in the universe, Dr. Detroit, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing things like this now. So thank you, Doc.
Absolutely, well said. So the other thing too is that I should actually probably give out my Twitter addresses because I never actually do that. You obviously will know the Twitter address to this show. It's simply the Zaius Report. That's obviously pretty straightforward. But of course, my Twitter address is Martini Superdry. I think that's it. I hope that's it. So you can follow me there as well, although you won't find very much apart from some pictures of model trains and that sort of stuff. But anyway.
And he's bragging about getting his car washed and drinking lattes and things,
Oh, at least I know you read my Twitter, Gary.
Damn, I've just been exposed.
But obviously, please follow Gary at GJ69 on Twitter, and feel free to say hi because he's a charming, lovely gentleman.
Aww. I'm also partial to gift war, so if you ever want a gift war.
Oh, there you go. So, thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back next week with another podcast. And we better go now because someone started up their lawnmower. I think you might be able to hear it in the background. So I think that's a sign that we've got to get going. So
that wasn't euphemism.
So thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with podcast number 9.
Bye bye.